Welcome back to the channel, and for this week we're hopping back in the 1-2 streets. For 2025, I'm trying to make $25 an hour while playing the same amount of hours at both 1-2 and 1-3. So far, we aren't off to the best start. Last week, we lost $1,372 in just 2 1-3 match stack sessions. Crazy thing is, we actually played some pretty decent poker, but we just ran into some insane coolers and lost 5 out of 6 all-in pots. And as for the year 2025, we're now down $1,621 overall in just under 25 and a half hours of play.
Oh, what a loser!
While losing that much money in that short of a time span is painful, it's not nearly as painful as having to listen to an entire video narrated by my monotone voice. So to whoever watches these vlogs week in and week out, I just want y'all to know that you guys are the real MVPs. And to everyone in the comments telling me that I should quit poker because of how bad I play, I just want to let you all in on a little secret. In my 5-year poker career, I've never even come close to having a losing year, and I don't intend to start anytime soon. So to all you chat pros, I just got one thing to say.
I'm not fucking leaving! The show goes on! They're gonna need a fucking wrecking ball to take me out of here!
We head out to the nicest card room in Northern California, which is none other than Stone's Gambling Hall. But before we dive into this week's poker sessions, I just gotta let you guys know that each week I host an online meetup game on the Club GG app where I give away $100 to the highest stack at the end of the night. If you want in, or you're looking for a place to play low-stakes online poker, click the Club GG link in the description. We buy into the 1-2 game for the max of 300, and action gets started right away when I look down at ace-6 of diamonds in early position. $5 straddle is on, so I decided to open the price of poker to $15. I get called from a player in middle position, cutoff, and straddler. Going 4 ways to a flop with 60 in the middle, and the flop runs out king 5 deuce rainbow with 1 diamond. I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I've airball bluffed into 3 people in my entire poker career, but this board is just too perfect not to give it a go. I not only have the range advantage, but 2 pairs should never be represented on this dry of a board, and if I do get called, I could put a ton of future pressure on a weak king with a big turn barrel. So I start off with a bet of $18, and one by one, they all fold. Easy way to take down $45 of profit with the bluff. They don't happen often, but keep an eye out for these good multi-way bluff opportunities at your local card room. For this hand, I throw on the $4 straddle, and 3 people end up putting in the call. When action's on me, I look down at the hand I deemed as an early frontrunner for worst holding of 2025 in pocket 10s. Not only did I lose 5 straight pots with them a few sessions ago, they have also been flopping the world against me and beating me in big pots. But I can't just check my option and let these guys get away cheap, so I raise the price of poker to $25 and get called from a player in early position and the hijack. With $75 in the pot, we flop an overpair when the dealer throws out a 9-8-3 2-club board. I'm first to act, and since I have the overpair, I decide to throw out just over a half pot bet of $40, and both players end up folding. For the first time in 2025, I want a pot with pocket 10s, so either I'm buying a lottery ticket tomorrow, or this little downswing might be coming to an end. This 1-2 game at Stone's has been action-packed because the $5 straddle is on once again for this hand. There's 1 call in middle position, and the small blind just raises to $10. I'm in the big blind and look down at ace-jack offsuit, and this is a good hand to put in a re-raise with. I 3-bet to $30, and surprisingly the player in middle position who just called $5 pre-flop goes all in for $77 total. Small blind gets out of the way, and I obviously put in the call and turn over my hand like I always do when I'm all in. He also reveals his hand and shows queen-jack offsuit, so we have him in terrible shape. Flop comes out king 4-3 rainbow, turn deuce of clubs, and river 6 of hearts gives us the winner with just ace high. We scoop in this solid pot, and things are rolling early on. In our next interesting hand, we look to keep the momentum going when I'm in early position and look down at the ladies, pocket queens. There's no straddle on for this hand, so I just open them to $10. 4 people end up putting in the call, and now the big blind decides to put in a small 3-bet to $35. If he had aces or kings, I think he'd size up because he wouldn't want to start a calling train, so I'm pretty positive we have the best hand. And when that's the case, it's time to put more money in the pot. So I put in the 4-bet to $100 even, and the hijack, who's the same player from last hand, goes all in for 90 total. Folds back to the big blind, who just puts in the call. The hijack can basically have any two cards, and the big blind's range seems a lot like a medium pocket pair like 8s through jacks, or a big suited ace. Keeping that in mind, we go straight to a flop with 3-10 in the pot of king 9-3 with 2 spades, giving us second pair. He checks and flow, and this obviously wasn't the board we were hoping for. I think ace-king is an obvious candidate here, and if I bet, I think a lot of his pairs that we have beat would fold, which really isn't what we want. So after he checks, I decide to check it back in position. Turn peels off the 6 of spades, putting 3 spades on the board, and now our opponent throws out a super small bet relative to the pot of $65. I think all his medium pocket pairs could bet this sizing to get protection from another spade coming out, and if he had a king, I figure he'd probably bet this size as well to get value from jacks and queens. I think calling 65 to win 440, especially holding the queen of spades in my hand, is the only move. So I call, and the river is a blank and the deuce of diamonds. Our opponent slows down and checks, and I'm just trying to get to showdown now, so I check it back. He turns over king queen of hearts for top pair second best kicker, and the hijack, who was all in pre-flop, takes the main pot after turning over ace 5 of spades for the nut flush. That was a pretty annoying spot to lose after having king queen in awful shape pre-flop. That's poker for you. Unfortunately, after missing a set mining operation with pocket 5s, we are now officially stuck $40 on the day after being up over 160 early on, which seems like the theme of 2025 so far. Next hand up, we have an unofficial 1-2 bomb pot. Stones doesn't allow bomb pots at 1-2, but if everyone puts in the chips, they'll go straight to the flop. So all 9 of us threw in $10, and we got dealt 8-7 offsuit. With $90 in the middle, the flop came out pretty good in 8-6-5 rainbow, giving us top pair and a straight draw. Checks to me, and I start off with a bet of $35 to get value from a naked 7 and weaker pairs. Folds over to the hijack, who just rips in his entire stack of $290. The cutoff also jams for $190, and action gets folded back to us. I felt like calling here would be a pure gamble because there's no way I'm ahead of both players. I'm also not looking to coin flip for stacks hoping I hit a straight because someone might already have 9-7 and I'd be basically drawing dead. So I just fold and live to see another day. Hijack ended up having king 8 of spades and cutoff had 7-6 offsuit. Turn and river bricked out and the hijack scooped in this massive pot with just one pair. After losing back-to-back pots, I had on $100 to get my stack to the max, and I'm now into the game for $400 total. In this next hand, the $5 straddle is on and 3 people put in the call before action's on me in the big blind, and I look down at pocket 7s. If I had pocket 9s or better, I'd raise it up, but I decided to just call the $5 and see a cheap flop. But a cheap flop isn't in the cards because the straddler raises the price of poker to 35. Early position limber calls, cutoff calls, and that leaves me no choice than to call as well for that price, so I'm in there. With 150 in the middle, the flop is amazing when it comes out king jack 7 rainbow, giving us bottom set. I check it over to the pre-flop aggressor who checks as well, but now the player in early position throws out a small bet of $20. Cutoff puts in the call, and even though it's a rainbow flop, I need to start pumping some money in this pot so we could get stacks in by the turn. So I put in a small raise to $90, and without much hesitation, the player in early position just goes all in. Now action's over to the cutoff, and he snap calls. Never folding a set on this board, so I snap call as well, and this hand is officially off the rails because 3 big stacks are all in. The main pot I'm competing for is skyrocketed to $840, which is insane for a 1-2 game. Just like I always do when I'm all in, I roll over my hand face up. Turn peels off the 10 of clubs, which isn't my favorite because some straights get there, and river is horrible in the ace of diamonds, giving any queen a straight. But luckily for us, both players ended up having 2 pair, with the early position player having king jack offsuit and the cutoff having ace king offsuit, and we scooped in this massive pot. I just got one thing to say.
Tell them to bring me my money. Yeah!
With that win, we're now up $440 on the day and things are looking up. But unfortunately it didn't stay that way, because over the next hour our chip stack kept bleeding after losing some medium-sized pots with some really playable hands that couldn't hit shit. But that led us to another interesting hand. I'm under the gun, and for the second time today I looked down at the ladies, pocket queens, and opened them up to $15 this time. Guess we're playing a bomb pot because 5 people end up putting in the call, increasing the pot to $90. Going 6 ways to a great flop of 10-8 deuce rainbow, giving us the overpair. The standard play here would be to bet for value in this spot and target a 10 or 8, but I decided to play this hand a little unorthodox and go for the check raise since the table has been playing super aggressive. So I check, but surprisingly action gets checked around. Turn pairs the board in the 8 of clubs, putting 2 clubs on the board, and now it's time to bet for value. I throw out a bet of $35 targeting a 10 or any draw, and just the player in early position puts in the chips. Pot's now up to 160, and the river peels off the jack of clubs, which I actually liked a lot because it should give a lot of his holdings a pair now. When I make a value bet, I try to think the range I'm targeting, so when I throw out a bet of $75, I'm looking to get value from his straight draws that might have river top pair like Jack 9 or Queen Jack, while also targeting Jack 10 that we have crushed or any of his stronger 10s. Our opponent eventually puts in the chips, and I roll over my hand expecting to be good, but he turns over King 9 of clubs for the backdoor flush, which has us crushed. Unfortunately, that was our last interesting hand of day 1, so let's get to the outro.
Pocket queens didn't treat us too well today, or else we would have booked a massive win. But profit is profit, and I'll take it every time. In for 400 and out for 563 for a $163 win. Hoping to keep the momentum going for day 2.
We start off the session down around $50 after losing some small pots with some pretty fun hands until we get to our first interesting hand of day 2. For this one, there's 2 limps in early position, and I'm in the cutoff and look down at the infamous Ace-King offsuit and raise it up to $15. Now the small blind decides 15 isn't enough and min raises to 30. Folds to a player in early position who now puts in the cold call. Folds back to me, and I'm not having any of this. Both a min raise out of position and cold calls usually indicate medium strength holdings, so it's time to put the pressure on them. I put in the 4-bet to 120 expecting to get folds a lot of the time, but surprisingly both players put in the call. The pot has ballooned to $360 and there's still plenty of chips left to play for. We get an amazing flop when it rolls out A7-6 with 2 spades giving us top pair, top kicker. The player in early position now decides to go all in for his remaining $44 and action's on me. I have 128 left in my stack and I have 2 options. Call or go all in. In my opinion, I'm never folding to any turn cards since the pot's so big, so I decide to just call so I don't scare away the small blind. He calls as well, so now the pot has increased to $492. Turn peels off the jack of spades, bringing in the front door flush, and the small blind starts off with a check. Nothing to do than just go all in, so I put in my remaining $84 and the small blind goes deep in the tank. He eventually ends up folding pocket 10s with the 10 of spades, so I turn over my hand face up, and after the 6 of clubs river, early position looks at my hand and tosses his hand in the muck. We're off to a great start like yesterday, so now we're just hoping we can keep it going in the right direction this time. Next hand up, there's 2 limps, and an aggressive player in middle position opens the action to $15. I'm in the low jack and we look down at King Queen offsuit. Against some players I would just call in this spot, but I like 3-betting this hand in position against players that open wide. So I raise to $40, and once again we get a cold caller in early position. Original raiser calls as well, so we're going 3 ways to a flop with 120 in the middle of 10-3 deuce with 2 clubs giving us king high and a dream. Checks to me, and I hate giving up in 3-bet pots on non-connected boards, so I try to steal it by throwing out a c-bet of $45, and both players end up folding. Early position said they had pocket 9s, so by putting in the c-bet we scoop in $80 of profit with just king high. Next hand up, there's 1 limp in early position, and now middle position raises to $12. I'm in the hijack and look down at ace deuce of spades and decide to put in the call. The button, big blind, and early position limp are all put in the call, so we're going 5 ways to a flop of ace-8 deuce with 2 diamonds, giving us top and bottom pair. Original raiser c-bets for $35, and he's not betting into 4 people here without at least 1 pair or flush draw, so when action's on me, it's time to put more money in the pot. I raise the price of poker to 110, and after everyone else folds, he ends up putting in the call. Pot's now sitting at 280, and we're hoping for a low blank, and that's exactly what we get when the turn peels off the 4 of spades. He checks in flow, and he has around a pot-sized bet left in his stack, and we don't want a scare card to hit on the river, so I go all in and put him to the test. He thinks for a little, but ends up putting in the chips, and the pot has exploded to $830, which is massive for a 1-2 game. I turn over my hand face up like I always do when I'm all in, and after the river peels off the 6 of clubs, he looks at the board and ends up tossing his hand in the muck. It feels pretty good to win 2 massive pots at 1-2 in such a short period of time. After getting my ass handed to all last week, I just got one thing to say.
I think I got my swagger back. Oh.
For this next hand, there's 2 limps to me, and I'm in the cutoff and look down at the beautiful ace-jack of spades and raise it up to $15. I get called from the small blind, player in early position, and the hijack, so we're going 4 ways to a flop of queen-jack-7 with 2 hearts, giving us middle pair top kicker. Everyone checks it over to me, and I think our hand is good enough to value bet even against 3 people. So I throw out a bet of $25 looking to get value from all the draws, and surprisingly every single player puts in the call. So we're still going 4 ways to a turn with 160 in the middle, and it peels off the deuce of spades, which shouldn't really change anything. Checks to me again, and at this point I don't think a bet can get a queen to fold, so I'm just trying to get to showdown now. I check it back, and the river peels off the 3 of clubs. Action gets checked through again, and early position shows jack-5 of clubs for a worse middle pair, and the player to my right shows ace-5 of hearts for a missed flush draw, and we have everyone beat, scooping in this solid pot with just second pair. The beauty about 1-2 is people don't bluff enough, so it's easy to get to showdown and realize your equity in a lot of spots. We're about 3 hours into the session before we look down at ace-7 of clubs in the small blind. A solid player in early position opened the action to $12, and he's not raising in the spot without a pretty good holding. Everyone folds, and action's on me. Playing in the small blind isn't ideal, but we're pretty deep, and this hand has some pretty good post-flop playability. So I put in the call, and so does the big blind. Going 3 ways to a flop of 6-5-4 rainbow, giving us the straight draw. Both the big blind and I start off with a check to the pre-flop aggressor, and he throws out a c-bet of $20. On this flop, I have way more straights, 2 pairs, and sets than he can have, especially holding the 7 blocker, so now it's time to put our opponent to the test with a semi-bluff and possible triple barrel bluff. So I raise the price of poker to $70, but the big blind ruins our plan and puts in the cold call, which screams major strength to me. Early position gets out of the way, later telling me that he had an overpair, so our read was spot on. But now we have to figure out what the hell the big blind has. At worst, I think he has a hand like 7-6 with a pair and a straight draw, but most likely he already has 2 pairs set. With 195 in the middle, the turn peels off the 7 of hearts, now giving us top pair and putting 4 to a straight. I start off with a check, and now he checks it back. River is the deuce of hearts, and I'm not in the business of getting 1-2 players to fold a set or 2 pair, so I check, and he snap checks it back, revealing 5-4 offsuit for flop 2 pair. It would have been super fun to make this play against an overpair, but unfortunately the big blind woke up with a hand and ruined our plans. We played for a bit longer and even moved seats to get a better view, but nothing significant happened, so let's get to the outro.
Poker's pretty fun when all your big hands hold up and you even get a couple bluffs through. In for the original 300, and out for $10.69 for a solid $769 profit. I'm trying to play more poker each week, so I'm coming back for a day 3, and hopefully we could get a win tomorrow to start a winning streak.
We started day 3 winning and losing a ton of small uneventful pots, so we're about an hour into the session and down around $10 before our first interesting hand of the day. I throw on the $4 straddle to increase the blinds and hopefully induce more action. Under the gun calls the $4, and now the player next to act just rips a short stack in for 30. He's been running terrible and is super tilted, so this can be any two cards at this point. Hijack calls, small blind calls, and when action's on me, I look down at Queen Jack offsuit. I can guarantee if I call, the player to my left will call as well, so I'm basically calling $26 to win a pot of $150, and even though this isn't the best hand, I have to defend my straddle. So I put in the chips, and just like we expected, so does the player to my left. There's $150 in the middle, and we get a horrible flop of ace-7 with 2 spades, but luckily action gets checked through. Turn peels off the Queen of Hearts, giving us second pair decent kicker, but sometimes people slow play trips, so I checked again to see if anyone bet, but luckily it got checked through again, so I think we have the best hand now. River was the 8 of diamonds, and I don't think anyone has much, so I throw out a super small bet of $20 and just get called by the player to my left. I turn over my hand, and he mucks right away. The player who was all in pre-flop shows Queen 7 offsuit, and our kicker plays, so we scoop in this entire pot. Next hand up, early position opens to $6, which was definitely a sizing tell. I've seen him open his big hands with a $10 to $12 raise, so I expect weakness. The player in middle position calls the $6, and I'm on the button and look down at pocket 10s. Sometimes I just call with pocket 10s, but since I sense weakness, it's time to put more money in the pot. So I 3-bet to $32, but now the small blind goes all in for $160 total, and everyone else gets out of the way. It's not too much left to call, but cold 4-bets from the worst position possible are usually super strong hands, so at best I'm flipping with a hand like ace-king, but I most likely only have 2 outs, so I decide to toss my hand in the muck. And I'm happy I did, because he rolls over the best hand in poker, which is pocket aces, which obviously has us crushed. We then hit a stretch of about an hour where nothing really happened, until this next interesting hand. There's one limp, and a player in middle position opens the action to $10. Folds to me, and I look down at King-Queen offsuit. In my opinion, this hand plays a lot better as a 3-bet than a call, because it's hard to play multi-way, and the beauty about 3-betting rather than calling is you could represent a lot of boards in a heads-up pot and put major pressure on your opponent. So I 3-bet to $30, and just the original razor puts in the call. With $70 in the pot, the flop comes out ace-3 deuce with 2 clubs, and all we have is king high. But the beauty about 3-betting is we have all the ace-kings and ace-queens in our range that he has less of, so after he checks, I throw out a bet of just $20 and he snap folds. Easy way to take down $35 of profit with the bluff rather than just calling and hoping you connect in a multi-way pot. I'm a little late to record for this hand, but I decided to limp in with Queen 9 of spades in early position and 5 people joined the call fest. But now the big blind decided to throw in a small bet to $7 and every single one of us make the call. With $40 in the pot, the flop comes out Queen 4-3 rainbow, giving us a very average top pair, and when action gets checked to me, I throw out a half pot bet of $20. Folds to the small blind who puts in the call, so we're going heads up to a turn which peels off a pretty big blank in the 8 of clubs. He checks again, and my plan was to bet a small amount to get value from his straight draws and worst pairs, then check back most rivers. But before I could even throw out a bet, our opponent folds ace-5 of hearts face up, and we scoop in a decent little pot. Unfortunately, that was our last interesting hand of day 3, so let's get to the outro.
Not the most eventful day because we played in all small pots, but I'm happy to announce that we have officially started a winning streak. In for the original 300 and out for 455 for a solid $155 win to end the week.
As for this week in poker, we played a total of exactly 9 hours of 1-2 and profited $1,087 after booking a win in all 3 sessions. Feels nice to win that much after having a horrific run of cards last week, but there's still plenty of ground to make up. As for 2025, we're now only down $534 on the year, and our 1-2 results are looking pretty good so far. We're up $1,017 in just under 23 hours of play, which I'm really happy with. As for 1-3, we definitely have some work to do because we ran pretty bad in some big spots, and we're down $1,551. In order to make $25 an hour while playing the same amount of hours of 1-2 and 1-3, we're going to have to start running and playing better in the 1-3 streets. So that's where I'll be all next week, and I'm excited to get back on the felt and see if we could keep the winning streak going. Thanks for watching, and as always, I hope you guys run good at the tables, and I'd appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button to help me reach my year-end goal of 20,000 subscribers.